briefly, Genesis chapter 2, briefly, what did we talk about last week? What were some of the things that you remember?
Well, the Garden of Eden wasn't where I always thought it was.
All right, yeah,
That myth is eliminated out of my mind.
yeah, that can be an interesting one. We can't find where it is, right? We don't know where it was. And why is that?
Because of the changing of the earth after the flood, the shifting of the templates and everything on the...
Right, yeah, there would have been radical upheaval and change. The whole geography of the earth changed and shifted at that period of time. Why do they have similar names or the same names as what they had after the flood then?
The old world, we do things, Bismarck, Missouri is named after Germans, and the people that settled there were Germans.
Right, you'd take with you, kind of like into the new world, you take with you a lot of the old things. So yeah, they would have named things the same as well. So not really much of a problem there. Anybody else? What did we talk about last week that you can kind of remember that stuck with you maybe?
Before the flood, it was kind of a greenhouse effect.
Right.
Plants grew stronger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess animals and people live longer, maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. Biblically, we know that. And even from the fossil record, when we look at the fossil record, animals and plants were bigger than they are now, which would make sense if the earth was like a greenhouse. Higher pressure, too. You know, if you had a more pressure on the earth, things are hardier, that kind of stuff.
Sun ages.
Right. The rays. Yeah. So the rays would have been filtered out, all those bad rays and things of that nature. All right. Now we looked at the text, but in verse 25, it says that Adam and Eve, it says that they were both naked and yet they were not ashamed. What does that tell us? What does that mean?
For one, there was no sin because they were jealous of each other.
Mm-hmm. There's no sin, absolutely. There's no sin in there.
I'm not really aware. Their eyes weren't open to do that. They should be covered.
Their eyes weren't open to maybe shame, right? Or anything like that. So we would say that they were innocent, right? They were innocent. There's no shame. There's no guilt. Nothing like that. It's kind of like if a little toddler, those of you who have kids or have had kids, have your children ever just run out like butt naked and like into the living room or something? Like just like, well, there we are. There it is. There's no shame. There's no guilt. They're not doing it for any reason. That it's not a rebellious thing usually. But there's no shame. If a little toddler like that were to run up, naked and jump into Jesus' arms, there's an innocence there. And so that's what was going on prior to sin. Prior to sin entering the picture, this idea of they were naked and there's no shame, there's innocence, there's a purity. And we can still see a bit of that with little children who don't understand that there's anything wrong with just running out there, naked into the living room or something like that. After the fall, we see that nakedness actually takes on a symbolic meaning of sin. It's a reminder of the fall, and it's a reminder of humanity no longer having that relationship with God in the garden. So, for example, Exodus chapter 28, 42 through 43. Let's look at that real quick. This will give us this idea of nakedness, what it takes on symbolically after the fall. 28, Exodus 28, verses 42 and 43. Somebody want to read that? 28, 42, and 43. What? Your Bible doesn't have it. Your Bible's broken. Oh, well, I love when that happens, like, oh, the wrong book of the Bible, yeah.
Make linen undergarments as a covering for the body, reaching from the waist to the thigh. Aaron and his sons must wear them whenever they enter the tent of meeting or approach the altar to minister in the holy place, so that they will not incur guilt and die.
Okay, so,
This is the lasting ordinance for Aaron and his descendants.
so there's something there about this idea of covering up your nakedness, which again, we look at Genesis here, they were both naked, there was no shame, there was no guilt, there was nothing like that. So later on, after the fall, there's something that's going on. Nakedness is symbolic of sin, it's that reminder of what was lost. So this really should be shocking to us when we read it, that they were naked and there's no shame. That it's not like us, it's unlike us. Because we're in a world that's corrupt, we've all sinned, all of that. Paul?
Well, they really didn't know any difference until they ate from the fruit.
Right. That's right.
Because the devil said, the serpent said to them, that you'll be like God, you'll know good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they ate the fruit, it's when they realized that they were naked.
Mm-hmm.
And in verse 7, they realized they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves.
Right. Yeah. So prior to that, there was an innocence there. And again, we can kind of see that in the little kids. Little kids. It's not until later on that they become aware of sin and shame and all of that kind of stuff. So it should be something that kind of, that's, it should startle us in that sense because we don't live in that kind of a world. Go ahead, Richard.
So, as I read this, it sounds like I should be ashamed, and my wife should be ashamed if we see each other naked.
Yeah, that might be how you could read it, but that's really not what's going on there. You're talking about the Exodus passage? Yeah, the Exodus passage, because again, that's why I said it becomes symbolic of sin. Being naked, husband and wife, we know that that's good and godly. Paul will tell us, right, that the marriage bed is undefiled, things of that nature. So no, that would be good and godly. And kind of jumping on with what we talked about last week, husband and wife are one flesh, right? There's a connectedness there too. So no, there's something different there, but it's a good point to bring out that what we don't want to say is that being naked in front of our spouse is sinful and wicked and we should be ashamed and hide and all of that. That's not what's going on there at all. But there is a symbolism there. There's a connectedness between, and we see it when Adam and Eve have to be clothed. There's this connectedness between, there's a loss of innocence. There's a loss of that purity that was there. And nakedness is symbolic of that. You remember, and we'll get there, but you remember Noah, after the flood, he plants a vineyard and he drinks some of this intoxicating beverage and he gets drunk. He's naked in his tent. His son comes in and it says he uncovered his nakedness. He looked upon his nakedness. He saw that was sinful and wicked for him to do. So again, we see that connectedness. That wasn't his wife. That was his son. And again, it's symbolic. There's more going on in that text, but there's a symbolism related to nakedness. That's why there is no such thing biblically godly of a Christian nudist colony. What does that kind of thing deny? If you go to a nudist colony and they're out there, you can go to these nudist churches, right? And everybody's naked. What are they denying?
The possibility of lust.
Well, that's true, absolutely. And lust is sinful. They're denying the fall. They're denying that we live in a fallen world, that we have all sinned, that we are no longer pure, and they're trying to go back to Eden. You can't go back there. That's not, we have lost that ability to be in that pure state. So those kind of things would be wicked. Those would be ungodly. But husbands and wives seeing themselves each other naked is not. That's a different.
So do you think they were hiding from God?
Well, let's not jump there. And Paul made us jump there. We're going too fast. Slow down. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to back you up just a little bit.
Sure.
Ask about, I don't think we've talked about this, God's placement of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the garden.
Yes, we're going to get there. Let me stop you. We're going to get there. Yeah, I'm like jumping back and forth. That's all right. It's good. It's good. You know what that means? Everybody's thinking. Everybody's engaged. Wonderful. Praise God. I'm happy for that. The text that let me ask you this. What do you need for a good life? If you were to ask anybody in the world, or you were to think about it yourself, what do you need for a good life? Just, what are some of the things?
Being able to read the Bible.
Okay, so having the ability to read, good eyesight and a mind, that's a good life.
Having my family.
Having my family, so companionship, having your family with you. I think, Elaine, you're probably talking about the idea of having a relationship with God, right? Being able to read His Word, but it's because we want to know God. So, relationship with God, relationship with our family, having our family there. What else? What do you need for a good life?
Security.
Security, absolutely. Security. We want to feel protected. Love. Yeah.
Companionship.
Companionship.
Peace.
Peace. Absolutely, peace. Yeah. What about food?
Good cook.
Yeah. You need food, right? We need food to survive. Water. Protection. Safety. We need a home. We need a place to live, right? A place. What about a purpose? Like a reason to get up and kind of live your life, and hey, there's a purpose. There's a reason that I'm here doing something. So a reason, those kind of things. What about freedom? You need freedom to have a good life, right? If you don't have freedom, most people would say that's not a good life. People in physical bondage somewhere or something like that.
You have freedom for and freedom from, too.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Elaborate a bit.
Well, freedom from is those things that have beset us in the past that made us sinners.
Mm-hmm.
And freedom for is to do the will of God. And in essence, that's...
Sure. So freedom in all these aspects, absolutely. So let me ask you this. In Genesis chapter 2, what's man's health like? Because we need good health to have a good life. What's his health like?
At the end of that chapter is pretty good.
Yeah, chapter 2. Yeah, we're talking chapter 2. He's a living soul. Things are working. He's functioning. Everything's good there. How's he doing for food?
Plentiful food.
Plentiful food. Good. All kinds of trees, right? All kinds of food that he can eat from. Water. How's he doing for water? An abundance of water, right? In fact, this is like the best, spring water, mineral water. It's got all this. I mean, this is the best of the best. Abundance of water there. What about housing? How's he doing for a place to live? Yeah, he lives in a garden paradise. People want to go to, Hawaii or something like that because it's, these beautiful paradise places. They want to lay out on the beach. This was their home. Their home was a garden paradise. How's he doing? Go ahead.
Probably didn't need shelter.
No, not like this. Yeah, this would have been that tropical, even temperature. Remember, because you've got this dome of water vapor over the earth. There's no storms, so there's no fluctuation in really the climate or anything like that. So wouldn't have need shelter like this, but a home. Has a home, a great place, beautiful place to live. How's he doing for employment?
He's got plenty
Got a job.
He's got a job. What's his job?
Gardening.
Gardening. And what kind of job is gardening? It's labor, what's physical, right? And actually humans are meant to move their muscles. In
It's
fact,
also rewarding.
yeah, it's rewarding, right? Those of you who garden and like to garden, when you see that thing grow and blossom and you kind of step back and like, wow, it's creative. So in a sense, it's a reflecting of God's character as well, right? Because God plants the garden, God is a creator. Now man can't create like God can, but there's some aspect there where there's a creative kind of nature to man. So it's a very rewarding kind of job that he has, but he's got a purpose. He's got a job. He gets up, he goes to work. Now, his work, although it would have been physical, it would have been, getting your muscles moving, it wouldn't have been even like doing gardening today because he wouldn't have had any thorns, right? Thistles or things like that. But so it would have been very rewarding, very enjoyable kind of thing. How's he doing for companionship?
Oh, God, that's the first thing God saw that was not good.
Okay. He was alone originally, but at the end of 2, how's he doing for companionship at the end?
Pretty good.
Yeah. He's got a wife, right? There's this kind of a relationship, right? The human-to-human relationship is there. How's he doing with a relationship with God? This aspect.
Directly to him.
Yeah. God,
God answers it.
yeah, there's a direct line. It appears that God typically had a nice leisurely walk in the garden with them, from what we read in the next chapter. So yeah, he's got a lot going for him. Now God gives the man 2 things in this. He gives him, in the employment, he gives him the garden to take care of. He gives him that creative aspect. He gives him a purpose, so he takes care of the garden. He has a relationship with God. He has a relationship with his wife, so he has a man-to-man or human-to-human relationship, and he has a human-to-God relationship. So how would you sum up Adam and Eve's life at the end of chapter 2? It's great. What is it?
8 plus excellent.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get any better, right? You'd say it's very good. I mean, he has everything he needs for a good life, everything we kind of talked about. Does he have freedom?
Yeah, he is.
He does.
A little bit.
He's free to eat.
Total.
He's definitely
Restrictions.
free to eat from all the trees of the garden, so there's a freedom there. He does have a restriction. He has a restriction. And one of those restrictions has to do with not eating from one tree of the garden. So, let's talk about it. Why is there this one tree in the garden? Why is there one tree that he can't eat? Why did God put the tree in there to begin with?
With his life has to be a choice. There has to be a choice to have a relationship. And to have that with God, there has to be a choice.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, to have freedom, you have to have choice. If I said you're free to eat anything you want as long as it's ice cream, are you free? No, there's no freedom. You might like it for a little while, but it's not freedom. You do need choice, right? Mike brings up this point. We've got to have choice in order to have freedom. When our freedom is taken away from us, that means our choices are taken away from us, right? So they had to have the ability to say no in order to have this freedom. And again, in order to have a relationship.
Don't you think it was partially like a disciplining education type thing too? Like our kids, we would say you can play, but don't go downstairs. Was there a logical reason why they can't go downstairs? Or do you just want to be able to see that, well, what's going to happen if they go downstairs? They'll get in trouble, spanking, yelled at, time out, whatever you want to say. So are they hurt? Were they hurt when
Well, there's definitely this issue of, well, God is the one who's ultimately the authority figure. So whatever he says is good. What if he says to stay away from, obviously is bad for a reason. So there has to be an issue of trust, respect, love, that they were free to love God and to obey him. And so there's obedience there as well, that they were called to obedience. But let me ask you this, how difficult was this command?
I think difficult.
You think it was difficult?
They're curious, they wanna know
Well,
why.
maybe curious. If I locked you in the Walmart, a super Walmart, and I told you you could eat, you could eat anything in there as long as it was this one stale loaf of bread. That's what you could eat. Would that be reasonable?
No.
If I said you can eat from anything you want except the one stale loaf of bread, would that be reasonable? Of course it would be. This wasn't a difficult command.
But you could also look at it like, you can eat from everything except aisle 7. I'm with Glenda that there might be a curiosity factor. Though the text, I think, later will not show, I don't know that the curiosity was, it was nurtured by Satan.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a curiosity, but at the end of the day, we still have to say, was this really that difficult?
Probably not.
Yeah, it wasn't. There was only one tree. I mean, let's be honest. There was only one tree that they couldn't eat from. And
They fell.
they did. They did. It wasn't a difficult command.
And he warned them that if they did eat of it, they would surely die.
That's right. So they're given the consequences.
Yeah.
And the reason they're told not to eat of it is because it's bad for you. You will die. So they were given up front. This is why you don't eat it. But again, the reason it's there, it has to be there in order to have freedom and choice. But it would be different if God had said, you can only eat from this one tree. I think we really need to get the aspect here, the idea that this was really not that difficult of a command to keep. This wasn't like, I want you to only eat from this one rotten berry bush over here, and every other tree that you see that looks awesome, you can't touch. That would be overwhelming. Now, they did fall. They did fail. They did, that's true. But they were only given that one command that we know of. There's only this one command.
I can imagine, and imagination's not always good, but they probably lived for a long time not eating from that tree. I mean, it wasn't something I don't think that they looked at every day and said, wow, I'd sure like to have some of that.
Yeah.
You know, I think they were all right until Satan came along.
Yeah, they definitely have some help there,
Yeah.
kind of contemplating some of these things. I'm not sure how long they were in the garden. We're not really told. I don't think it would have been years, because they're told to kind of be fruitful, multiply, that kind of thing, and they probably would have done that fairly recent, but they would have been there, probably could have been there for days, weeks, we don't really know. But yeah, they're in there with it. And again, they have all these choices out there, and they choose to not do that. But the reason that the tree is in there is for choice and for freedom and to give them the ability to have a relationship. I can't really have a relationship with somebody if I can't choose not to have a relationship with them. It becomes robotic or something along those lines. Go ahead.
Well, I guess God would have created their knowledge to
Mhm.
know what good and evil is to some capacity, even though there wasn't evil yet, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's kind of something to get my brain
Yeah.
wrapped around of how do you have knowledge of evil or know what the concept is that there is no evil.
Yeah. Can you have knowledge of how to fix a car and never have fixed a car? Yeah, I can read about it. I can gain intellectual. Now, there is a difference between experiential knowledge and what we might say head knowledge. But they were perfect at this time. They were given reasons. I would assume that God gave them the ability to understand what he was saying. Otherwise, it's gibberish. And it doesn't make any sense, right? If he says you're going to die and they don't know what death is, they don't have a mental concept of what that might mean, then it's gibberish. So we have to assume that the creator of the universe, who gives language to man and all of this stuff, is able to give him information that he can understand. So there's nothing.
What language were they using? What language?
We don't know. We don't know. We know what language Moses wrote in to record this event, but we don't know what language it was. Some people like to say it was Hebrew, and we're going to speak Hebrew, and in heaven and all that. We don't know. We don't know what language it was.
There apparently wasn't any rebellious attitude whatsoever till Satan entered the picture.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Chapter 2 is a good chapter. Things are going well. Man has everything, absolutely everything they need for a good life. And they do have a command. They do need to obey God, which means they're going to have to respect and honor him, kind of what you were talking about there, Lacey. There's something going on there. He's the authority figure, and they had to choose to obey him. And they did, at least for a little while. Not sure exactly how long, but they did. But yeah, they have the ability to understand the command that God has given them. Again, if God gives a command and they can't understand it, then that really speaks against the character of God. So they're perfect. They should certainly have head knowledge. They wouldn't have experienced death, because death doesn't enter the picture here. At least death of animals and man doesn't enter in at this point. So yeah, they would have fully understood what was going on there.
Isn't that very true today, though?
What's that?
Each of us here, we have pretty much everything we need to have a good life. We read the Bible and God tells us what we need to do. If we don't follow what God tells us to do, then we can experience a death.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I mean,
Absolutely.
similarities here, and maybe this is a starting out point here, that there are commands that God will give not only to Adam and Eve here, but also carry over to Christians. And that if you don't follow, and for a lot of people, sin, to many people, looks good. This had to be a tempting thing to walk past or around this tree that had the fruit on it, and for them to kind of stay away from it. But then the curiosity, I guess that's what happens with people with sin. People get curious about stuff. They're not living the life they should, and sin doesn't necessarily look like something evil to them.
No, sin doesn't look bad. If it looked bad, we would avoid it. Do you know what I mean? Like and everybody's a little different. There are certain sins that would never appeal to me whatsoever.
Right.
But you might struggle with it. And I might think, how stupid. But then there's things that I struggle with that you would be like, come on, really? It has to look good to the person, otherwise we wouldn't do it. And even when we know the consequences, Adam and Eve knew the consequences. I believe they fully had that understanding about what was going to happen. So even when we know the consequences, a lot of times it still looks good and we indulge in it. And then we get hit with the reality that it's ungodly, it's not good, it's death in a package. It's a death in a pretty picture. I talked one of the sermons about the white elephant that they do up at North, and they'll wrap up junk, big tires and stuff like that, used tires or whatever, old batteries and stuff, and people want it because it's the biggest box, it's the prettiest looking wrapping paper, all of that, and when you open it up, joke's on you, now you got to get rid of it, it's yours. That's what sin is like. Sin looks good on the outside, but it's really just death wrapped in a pretty picture. So yeah, there's got to be something there that entices us. If it didn't look good, we just wouldn't do it. So that's absolutely true.
Book of Hebrews speaks of Moses fleeing from that, choosing never to serve God, and involving himself in the temporary pleasures of life.
Absolutely. And we see Joseph, too, in Egypt. He flees the temptation to get involved with Potiphar's wife. All right, so in chapter 1 and chapter 2, we have the creation event. Everything is perfect. It's wonderful. There's no sin in the world. There's no death in the world. Everything is fabulous. Then we get to chapter 3. I just had to look at the time, see there. Chapter 3, we find things start to go wrong. Everything's going great at first. They're flying high. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Chapter 3 is like the plane does a nosedive. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, we're going down in flames and we're going down fast. It's not well. So let's look at the opening verses here. Somebody want to read? Oh, let's say chapter 3. Let's just go through 7. Verse 7. Somebody want to read that?
Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden'?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die.' 'You will not certainly die,' the serpent said to the woman, 'for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves."
All right, so let's take this kind of a step at a time. We're running out of time here, but who is the serpent? Satan. How do we know this is Satan?
Well, in one of the Gospels, Jesus was speaking and he said, Satan is the father of lies.
Right. And he was he's a liar and a murderer from the beginning. Yeah. In Revelation 12:9, it talks about Satan, that serpent of old. So this is definitely Satan who comes in here, or the devil. Satan just means adversary. Devil means slanderer. But that's kind of the title we give to this being. We call him Satan or the devil to kind of describe who he is. Now, it appears from the text that Satan here has possessed a snake maybe, or has shape-shifted, if that's possible. We don't really get all the details, but there's a serpent that comes in, and this is Satan. Either he comes in the form of, that is, he kind of makes himself appear that way, or he takes possession of an animal, this animal or something like that, but he comes in there.
Well, it says the serpent.
Yeah.
It's the serpent.
Uh-huh.
It's more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something particular about that.
Yeah, well, this one's different, right? Because this one's Satan, kind of Satan incarnate coming in there.
But he
I
must
don't know
not.
if we're reading in that Satan was the serpent created that way. That's why I guess I'm asking, or did Satan get into that being?
Not sure what you're asking.
Well,
Like, did God create the people?
did God create from the beginning
Mm-hmm.
this being that had Satan in it?
Was-
Or did Satan get into this being that he describes as more crafty than any of the wild animals. Still not following?
I think I am. God created all the animals. And we know that at the end of the days of creation, everything is good. So there's nothing that's evil or wicked at that point. So that would mean all of the animals, all of that. I'm kind of the opinion that when this is talking about the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field, that it's really, in some ways, describing to us Satan, who's in here doing this. And it's not necessarily talking about that snakes are crafty creatures, that God has created this crafty kind of creature. I think there's something else going on there. And again, I would go to passages like Revelation and others that would tell us that this is actually Satan in the form of a snake going on here. And again, as we continue to read on, we're going to see that there's something different about this being, this serpent. That there's symbolism with the snake. There's symbolism there because it'll talk about crushing the head of the serpent and things of that later on. But I don't think, and again, I'm trying to follow exactly where you're
Well, I have
at.
another version now reading.
Sure.
It says, now the snake was the most clever of all the wild animals the Lord God had made.
Yeah.
So from the get-go, that version is saying
Seems to appear
it was always that way,
that a snake was
the most clever.
the most clever.
Well,
Yeah.
it says the most subtle, so doesn't that kind of mean like
Yeah.
sneaky and laid back?
Sure. Yeah.
This is cunning.
Cunning. Yeah, all of those really synonyms, right? All saying pretty much the same kind of thing. I would just have to go with what the rest of the scriptures say and putting it together. From what Jesus says, from what Revelation says. It appears to me that there's, in some ways, the animal is used here symbolically of what Satan is all about. Satan is the most crafty. Satan is, do you know what I mean? But it's couched in this language of all the animals. Because again, when Adam and Eve see this animal, they don't see Satan. They see a crafty snake, a creature that was created by God in the garden. You know, an animal, they see an animal. So that's the way I would take it. If you wanted to go in a different direction, that's fine. I kind of see why you're going where you're going. But then we have to explain what the other texts say. You know what I mean? Like what Jesus says or what Revelation says about Satan, who was the serpent from the beginning kind of thing. So I think it's symbolism in there describing to us Satan's character at this point. That's what I would say. Go ahead.
Satan was a fallen angel, right?
Yes.
Right? Okay, so Satan has taken possession of this snake, of this
Right.
animal, and has acted in this way to tempt. So
Yes.
the serpent, I don't think, maybe I'm not hearing right either, but I don't think God created this serpent and said, you're the devil. Now you go tempt these people.
Right, yeah. And I'm not sure that's what Tim is saying. But the text kind of sounds, if you just read it in isolation apart from the rest of the Bible, I understand what you're saying. If you read it in isolation from the rest of the scriptures, it almost sounds like God created this snake as a crafty creature, craftier than any other animal. I understand that. But we have the rest of the scriptures that we look at that fills in the picture, is really what I'm saying. So once you marry all of the scripture together, it really just seems to be a way that to describe this craftiness of Satan. I think Satan possessed the snake. I think that's what happened. I think there was a snake, Satan comes in, he possesses it, and the way the text is saying is Satan, you can use Satan versus snake, that's the way I read it. Satan was more crafty then, and not just the beasts of the field, though, but he was the craftiest out of all of them. Right? He's the one that's coming in there and going to do all this tempting or whatever.
But he can talk to this.
Yeah.
There's no horror here. An animal is talking.
Yeah.
And, you know, There's nothing abnormal about that. Even today, creatures are all different. Different kind of creatures
Sure.
after the fall. But it looks like, and the crafty is not a very good word,
Right.
but there's still no knowledge of that. So there's something harmonious that's still in existence, that Adam is so innocent that he's like a little baby that we were talking about, and he's talking,
Yeah, well, Eve is the one who's talking.
or even
Yeah.
talks to this snake, which
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that there's a talking snake.
nobody's, there's probably talking dogs.
Yeah, maybe there might have
That
been.
disrespect.
It might have been. It might not have been. This might have been a unique.
There's not a verse
Thing.
that Eve marveled at the talking snake. There's not.
Right. So we don't really know. We're not really told. All we know is that when Eve talks to the serpent, she just chatting along like everything's good, like this is normal. So it may very well have been normal, or it may not have been. It may just have been an innocence of, oh, okay, there's a creature that talks. I didn't know that did that, but it does. So, there's no shock or horror to it. But yeah, absolutely, there's something going on here in this text. Yeah, we are out of time, but yeah, I think so too.